Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we have a little bit of a special review. This is going to be review number 2800, and as I always do in these mini milestone reviews, I just want to give a huge shout out and thank you to you guys that have supported the channel over the last 7¾ years, I think it is now. So whether you've liked, subscribed, shared, commented, given me some information on a beer or brewery, sent me some beer, shown me around somewhere in the world, a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been a great journey and I'm sure we'll continue it for many years to come. It's also great to be a part of the beer tubing community. There's some really great beer reviewers out there, so do make sure you go and check out some of those guys as well. There's beer tubers all over the world these days, which is awesome to see. But yeah, since this is a little bit of a special review, I thought we would do something a little bit unusual, and I have to say this is a beer that I'm very excited to try. So for the very first time here on the channel, we are going to go to Vietnam in Southeast Asia, and we're going to have a look at a beer from a brewery who are really getting their name out there a little bit at the moment. So for this one, we are going to go to Ho Chi Minh City, or Saigon as it was known until 1976, and we're having a look at a beer from Heart of Darkness Brewery. So this particular beer is called Eloquent Phantom. It comes in at 11% ABV and it's an Imperial Stout. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. I have actually had a beer from this brewery before, and that was when I was in Hong Kong, maybe about nearly 2 years ago now, and it was an IPA, I think, brewed in collaboration with Heroes Brewing Company, who do some awesome beers as well, actually. But it's nice to see that the Asian beer scene is kind of spreading further. I mean, obviously due to my family connections, I've reviewed a good number of beers from Japan. I was in Korea and Hong Kong in the last trip I was over in Asia as well, so there's been a number of South Korean and Hong Kong beers reviewed on the channel. I've had one from Thailand as well, but this is the very first time I'm reviewing something from Vietnam. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. But the IPA I had involving this brewery before was very good, and Heroes, like I say, are a very good brewery as well. So definitely nice to be able to return to this brewery and do a proper kind of sit-down review for you. Special shout out in this video as well to Riku Sanaxanaho, my Finnish beer mule. When we were putting together the last Finnish beer box that we did, we had a little look on Alco, and they had some of these beers which were a really random find. So we chose this one and that was stuck in the box. So again, thank you to Riku for making this review possible. So this beer's had a bit of a journey. It's gone from Vietnam to Finland, and then it's come here to me in southern Sweden. So yeah, looking forward to this, and as I say, I hope you guys enjoy my take on this one. So let's go for it then. As always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Heart of Darkness Brewery. This is the very first time I'm reviewing one of their beers here on the channel, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. I will make one for the Vietnamese beers, and hopefully I can add to that at some point in the near future. This is the very first time a Vietnamese beer is here on the channel, of course, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review, especially if you're watching in Vietnam. I would love to learn more about the Vietnamese beer scene, but as always, please do get in touch and let me know about that. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Heart of Darkness Brewery. So Heart of Darkness Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Ho Chi Minh City, previously Saigon, in southern Vietnam, and the company was founded back in 2016. The main men behind the company are John Pemberton and Dwayne Morton, although there are other investors in there as well. But John is English and he has a background in economics and finance. He's worked in various different places, but while growing up in England, he was a fan of the traditional cask beers, and then in the 2000s when he was working in New York, he developed a love of the American craft beers. Later on in 2013, he was offered a job at IKEA, and he moved out to Vietnam there, and this was where he converted his bathroom into a home brewery, and the hobby just kind of took over. Dwayne, on the other hand, is originally from New Zealand, and he's had a long career in brewing and has worked for Invercargill, Moa, Carreru and Panhead before he moved to Vietnam to be the head brewer at Heart of Darkness. Both of these guys say that the audience of the brewery was originally Westerners, but it's really kind of developed over time actually. They say that the Vietnamese food scene is very kind of vibrant, and the really kind of strong flavours there help them to cultivate a local interest in craft beer. So it's, it started off mainly Western people visiting them, but lots of locals coming in and enjoying the beers as well, which is great to see. You see the same in Japan. I've seen that there as well. A lot of people in Japan often just thought of beer as something to clear the throat, but they are getting more and more open to the idea of different kinds of beers, which is great to see. But the brewery itself is located about 20 kilometres to the north of Ho Chi Minh City, and it's a 1,000 square metre facility. They've got a big large system in there for brewing their core beers, but they've also got a small pilot system as well, which is apparently John's old home brewing system, and they use that for producing the little pilot batches and things like that go into the tap rooms and stuff. But they've got their tap room in District 1 Ho Chi Minh City, and if you look at the picture of this place, it looks really, really nice, and they've got a very impressive food menu as well. I think I need to go to Vietnam and just have a visit there and see what it's all about. But they've got 20 taps. Apparently 10 of them are the core beers from the brewery, and then the other 10 taps are rotating taps. But over the last few years, they've been doing a number of collaborations with many breweries from across the world. They've been collaborating with the likes of Evil Twin over in the States. I think they've been doing a few collaborations with breweries here in Europe as well, so I'll need to keep an eye out for the collaboration beers from these guys. But they've also been building up their distribution in Asia, and they've got a bar in Singapore now as well, which I would love to go and visit. Singapore is another place that's on my list in Asia. Hopefully on the next trip we can get that done. But the name of the brewery itself, Heart of Darkness, it seems a little bit unusual for a Vietnamese brewery, but it's taken from Joseph Conrad's novel The Heart of Darkness, which was written back in 1899, and this was apparently John's favourite book when he was growing up in England, and many of the core beers take their names from this book. I'm not sure how many of the names come from how many of the names of the kind of rotating beers come from that, but I think a lot of the core beers are named after things from this book. But as of April 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, these guys have produced around 410 different kinds of beer. So, for having been in existence about 5 years roughly, that is pretty impressive. About 80 beers per year, something like that. So yeah, that is pretty damn cool. But that's all I can really tell you about Heart of Darkness Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's it for your history section. Let's get on and taste the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a little quick look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. As you can see, it's absolutely beautiful, and if you have a look at the website, you'll see the artwork on the other beers as well. It is very, very nicely done. It looks great, but it tells you a little bit about the beer on the side here. So it says Eloquent Phantom Imperial Stout, 11% ABV, 80 IBUs, 4 hops, 3 malts, 2 sugars, 2 spirits, 1 spice, 1 wood. This is a complex beer, very rich and full-bodied, lifted by the judicious use of American spirits and Madagascan spice. Oak conditioning adds another layer of complexity. A beer to sip and enjoy. So yeah, it seems pretty cool actually. But yeah, the artwork on that is absolutely lovely. From what I understand, the to have this wax top on the bottle is a little bit unusual. If you look on the website, the bottles don't have the wax tops on them, but I think this maybe is just for the beers that are being exported actually. I think the Finnish imports are some of the first of these beers to reach Europe actually, from what Riku told me. So yeah, that is pretty damn cool actually. But yeah, this one basically barrel aged Imperial Stout. I'm guessing it's Madagascan vanilla that's in this one. So yeah, I think this could be very, very interesting. But yeah, beautiful bottle this one. I can't remember what we paid for this actually. I think Riku maybe paid about €5 or €6 for it, something like that, which is pretty cool. The other thing I read about this brewery is that they keep their beers in bottles because, in Asia, having the bottles means that it's distinguished as a kind of premium product rather than the cans, because cans are, considered disposable over there. And you see the same with the Japanese breweries as well, and the South Korean ones that I've encountered too. But yeah, certainly very nicely presented, this one. So you can see they've also, the wax top on this is actually very nicely done. They've put the Heart of Darkness thing on the top of this, so I think I'm going to need to keep this bottle. But I did, before making the video, I had to put a slice in it just to make sure I could actually get it open. So now let's try this and see if we can actually get into this bottle. I'm hoping that we can and we don't have to pause the video, but yeah, I think we can maybe get in here. Yeah, there we go. Aha, got you. Yeah, that's nice. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. That's the only thing I dislike about these wax tops, but that one came off fairly cleanly, so I'm happy with that. That's a thick wax though, look at that. Crazy. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. The 11% Eloquent Phantom Imperial Stout from Heart of Darkness Brewery in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City in southern Vietnam. Quite a bit of carbonation on that as well, actually. Yeah, there we go. That looks nice. So, set the bottle back down, check that it's good for my OCD, and there we go. So, yeah, as you can see with this one, and as you would expect from an Imperial Stout, it's poured a lovely dark ebony colour. So you can see there's a solid finger of a frothy, I would say medium beige head on this one. It's not the darkest head that I've kind of come across before, but it's got a lovely little bit of a beigey colour to it. It's nice and foamy, but it is a little bit bumpy. Up towards the top of the head there, which I really like. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass there, and a few little ones just going up towards the bottom of the glass there, or towards the bottom of the head, I should say. I'm having a brain fart. But yeah, if we shine the light through this, it is actually pitch black, this one. It really is very, very dark. So I mean, you're not even getting a little bit of that sort of Coca-Cola coloured Pepsi edge that you'll sometimes get from these beers, even up towards the head. So yeah, can't really tell whether this one would have a little bit of a natural haze to it, but that's quite common with Imperial Stouts. But yeah, the colour of your beer is dependent on a few different things. One, the type of malts that you use. Two, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker beer. But again, it's dependent in the first instance on exactly what malts you use, and barrel aging and adjuncts are going to have an effect on the colour as well, but it's less pronounced in darker beers like this. But yeah, nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance. It certainly looks the part of an Imperial Stout. So let's have a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one. I'm very curious to see what this has in store for us. That smells really nice. It smells quite old school actually. It smells like a proper old school roasty toasty Imperial Stout, but at the same time it is very, very woody, so I'm guessing that it has been barrel aged like it says. So it smells like it's oak barrel aged. So yeah. It's got a lovely, just kind of slightly woody, spicy character to it as well, which is very nice. But yeah, there's a lot of depth to that aroma. Yeah, pretty cool. So, one thing I'm curious, I'll say it before I taste the beer. One of the things I always notice with a lot of Asian beers actually is that the mouthfeels tend to be a little bit lighter. And I think that's because in Asia it's very hot and humid, of course, but beer is supposed to be drinkable. So I'm curious to see whether that's going to be the case in this beer as well when we taste it. But the aroma, this is lovely. So let's try and break it down. The backbone of the beer for me has a nice, it's got a nice sort of smooth woody, there's a slightly spicy woody character to this as well. It's almost a little touch like kind of cherry wood or something like that. It's got a little bit of that, but obviously you get the smoothness and the slightly vanilla characteristics of the oak in there. So yeah, there's just a wee touch of spiciness to the oak, which I find really interesting. But yeah, the way everything goes together in that, I think, is really nice. I mean, it's got such a depth to it, this beer. But sitting on top of the woody notes there, you do get a little bit of a toasty bread crusty element to it. You can smell a little bit of the roasty, toasty black malt in the beer. There's a nice wee bit of a sort of brown, wholemeally bready character in there too. And then you've got the chocolates and the brown sugar kind of coming out too. So the chocolate that you get in this beer, it actually comes across as quite a dry, powdery chocolate, which is interesting. But the vanilla that you get out of this beer gives it a little bit of milkiness. So it actually reminds me, in a way, of if you here in Sweden, it's Oh Boy is the kind of chocolate powder that a lot of people use. But it reminds me of like Nesquik, the powder that you use in milk to make hot chocolate and all of these kind of things. It really, really reminds me of that, come to think of it. So that's definitely an interesting point to make about this beer. Nice kind of dry sort of powdery chocolate to it, but it does come across as quite milky at the same time. There's a wee bit of brown sugar in this one, but I don't find the brown sugary notes to be all that prominent. There's a bit of sweetness right in the middle of the nose there, and it is quite a sweet caramel, but as you will get a little bit of a toasty brown sugary element for it as well. But the brown sugar notes for me really take a little bit of a kind of back seat in this one, which is quite interesting. There is a bit of a kind of herbal vibe about this beer to a degree as well, which is quite interesting. I do just get a little bit of a slightly herbal kind of undertone to it, but if you take the aroma in a little bit more deeply, you get a lot of sweetness out of it. You get the vanilla, you get the vanilla, you get the kind of powdery, you get that lovely kind of powdery chocolate you can note out of that sweet powdery milk chocolate, a bit of the brown sugar, and then you can smell the smoothness of the wood just underneath this one, and a bit of the bread too. If you take the aroma of this in deeply, it goes together very nicely. There is you do get a wee bit of the roasty toasty black malts out of it, but overall this beer is actually quite smooth, and it starts to lean towards the sweet side of things when your nose adjusts to it. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, in terms of the hoppy side of the beer then, the hops, I think this one, it seems that quite a bit of the hop has dropped out of this one, and of course with an Imperial Stout, the longer you keep it, the more pronounced that effect is going to become. But yeah, you do get a wee bit of earthiness out of it. You can smell a little remnant of a kind of floral character. There's a wee bit of grassiness still in this one as well, though. But obviously, if you drink this beer fairly fresh, you're going to get that. But yeah. The thing I'm wondering about it, the more I smell of it, the more I wonder whether it's had oak chips in it rather than being barrel aged, because the woodiness is quite bright in a sense. So that makes me wonder if it's oak chips rather than a barrel aged note, than a barrel aged beer. This one, but then again, when you've got the hoppiness in this beer, it has dropped out quite a little bit. So maybe it has been barrel aged, and then obviously this bottle has been sitting for a wee while, which is fine for an Imperial Stout. So yeah, I do wonder that. Is it oak chips, or is it oak chips, or is it barrel aged? I'm not sure. Hard to tell actually from the aroma. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, then it's interesting. You do get a wee touch of cakiness out of this beer, which kind of mixes in well with the fruity side of things. So for me, there's a bit of a juicy plum. There's a little bit of a kind of black curranty. There's a kind of black curranty, blackberry sort of vibe to it as well, which I like. Yeah, there's a bit of a black curranty, blackberry sort of vibe to it. So yeah, it has. There is a wee touch of that almost phenolic, cough syrupy, medicinal type thing coming out of this beer, which is quite interesting. I wonder if that's something to do with the yeast or whatever. But I do get just a little bit of that kind of fruity, medicinal, cough syrupy type thing sitting underneath the beer. So yeah, a little bit of plum, a little bit of raisin, and then you've got a wee bit of a black curranty, blackberry sort of thing coming out of this beer too. So this one's really interesting actually. I think the aroma of this beer certainly has got me curious to see how it turns out, but I think it's about time that we try this one. As I always say, it'll take a bit of time to ponder over the aroma before you get stuck into a beer. I think this one is going to be pretty damn nice actually. So let's go for it. This one is the Eloquent Phantom, apparently a limited edition, an Imperial Stout coming in at 11% ABV from the Heart of Darkness Brewery in Ho Chi Minh City in southern Vietnam. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's very nice. That is a very, very nice beer, this one. It is kind of, like I was saying, it has got an element of drinkability to it, which in honesty you need in very hot Asian countries, absolutely. But that's a solid beer. It really is very nicely done. Yeah, if you come across this one, this is worth trying, definitely. I mean, if you see a beer from a Vietnamese brewery and you're going to think, oh, that's unusual, so a lot of the time you'll pick it up for the novelty side of things. But in terms of quality, you won't be disappointed with that for sure. So even if you do pick it up with novelty, you're in for a bit, with the idea of novelty, you're in for a bit of a treat with it for sure. I'll need to see whether Koji in Asahiya in Osaka has had any of these beers. I can't remember whether I've seen them on the Facebook page, but he's my beer dealer in Osaka. So yeah, I like how this beer goes about its business for sure. So let's try and break down the flavour of this one then and describe it properly. First impression though is it's a very smooth and quite slick beer. The one thing you have to remember about these, if it has been barrel aged, what will often happen is you will lose a little bit of the mouthfeel, but in exchange you'll get a lot of these woody infused flavours, and there's quite a lot in this one. But this beer is it develops a bit more of a roasty toasty quality the further you go into the aftertaste. It does have quite a bit of a roasty toasty bitterness to it. It did say on the bottle it's 80 IBUs, so that's not surprising. But yeah, let's try and break this one down then. So in that middle third of your palate, you can feel that nice, smooth, oaky, woody character to the beer. You can feel that just forming the backbone of it. On top of that, you've got a nice roasty toasty. You do have a nice sort of roasty toasty, well-fired bread crusty element to the beer. So, you know, this beer does have a good little bit of that, and I wonder if it's maybe special B or if it's black malt or something that's been used in the base of this. I would be curious to know what malts they're using. Are they using European or American malts, or are there some in Vietnam that they can use? But yeah, the malty side of the beer, really roasty toasty backbone sitting on top of that nice kind of smooth, pardon me, woody element there. You will also notice if you go to the very centre of your palate and then just move forward, you do get a little touch of nuttiness out of this one too, which is very, very nice. So yeah, I certainly can appreciate that about the beer. So yeah, little subtle undertones of nuttiness. On the front half of that middle third of your palate, you definitely get a wee bit of a kind of vanilla. There's a wee bit of the vanilla kind of coming out there as well, and then you just get the nuttiness coming as a little complexity of the vanilla. But yeah, base layer of the beer is that smooth oaky wood. On the front half of the middle third, bit of a vanilla, a little bit of a nutty note, and then on top of that, there's a nice toasty, well-fired bread crusty sort of thing. So that has to be Carafa or Special B or something like that that's in there. But sitting on top of that, you do get a nice layer of a sort of brown, wholemealy bread sort of thing. There is a little bit of that there. It's definitely not sweet enough to be like a German rye bread or something. But then on top of the bread, that's where you get that kind of powdery, dry chocolate powder kind of character that you're getting out of this one. It's a really smooth chocolate. It's a bit hard to place whether it's a more milky chocolate or whether it's a more it's a bit hard to see whether it's a more milky chocolate or a more kind of sweet chocolate in a sense, actually. So yeah. But yeah, on that chocolate side of things, what you'll find is that the middle of your palate kind of moistens up a little bit more the further you go into the aftertaste, and the chocolate just kind of sweetens up a little bit, so you could get the really dry sort of powdery chocolate elements on the extremes, but it's almost like in the middle third of your palate you've got a nice sort of circle there. You get the sweeter, more oily chocolatey elements coming out of this one, which is interesting. But then in the very centre of your palate you do get a little bit of a kind of sweet brown sugary note to it, and it's maybe a little bit treacly, molasses-like, but as you move further out from that centre throughout that circle there, it definitely becomes a little bit more kind of roasty and toasty, if you like. So yeah, it's interesting, that one, that the brown sugary notes on this again are quite subtle, and this beer, it really does lean towards that roasty toasty side of things the more that you drink of it. So yeah, but I like how smooth the mouthfeel is in this one. It really has a nice smooth element to it. It's definitely not the thickest of Imperial Stouts you're going to come across, but as I say, I think that is the fact that it's an Asian Imperial Stout, and they want a bit of drinkability to these beers over there. But yeah, I like the middle third of your palate in this one is where all the complexity in the beer is, and I think we've kind of covered that in quite a bit of depth now. It's a very layered flavour that you get out of this one. But yeah, on the border region between middle third and back third of the palate, again you can feel a little bit of a kind of thicker bready note there and a bread crust. But then on the back third of your palate, you can feel the more toasty, roasty, well-fired bread crust notes. They're forming the backbone of the beer there, and on top of that, you can feel a little bit of the thick, the kind of more airy, yeasty qualities coming out of the beer. So if you start at the back of the palate and move further forward, you can feel the sort of top of the flavour is up here, but then as you move forward, it gradually kind of comes down a little bit. As you reach that border region, it sort of condenses, and then the middle third of your palate, the flavour is quite densely packed in a sense. So yeah, that's how the middle of your palate, the middle third and back third of your palate goes in this one for me. On the hoppy side of things, in the back corners of the palate, there's definitely a good little bit of earthiness there, but in fairness, the earthiness is quite smooth, and it spreads forward a fair little bit, but as you reach the kind of the front half of the sides of your palate, it starts to show a more floral note, and then on the very front kind of corners, the tips of the corners of your palate there, you do get a fair little bit of floral character out of this one. Remember though, with this beer, it depends when you drink it. I think there's been a few different iterations of this beer. So maybe it's maybe been. I think they do a new version of this beer every year, because I've seen on Untappd there was a 2019 version, a 2021. I'm guessing the one I have is the 2020, but. Yeah, so depending on when you drink this beer, you'll get a different level of hoppy character out of it. But round the front curve of the palate, there's still a wee bit of grassiness there and a tiny, tiny little bit of a zesty note to it. So yeah, it does have a wee bit of a green component to it, this beer, which is nice. But this is a proper old school Imperial Stout. It's not like your kind of pastry stout and these big oily, creamy things that you're getting today. This is a proper old school Imperial Stout. And I've been enjoying quite a few of these recently, I have to say. So this is no exception to that. This one's very well done. Yeah, in terms of the fruity side of the beer, then, as I always say, on that front third of your palate, you get that nice, slightly oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you've got a little bit of a thicker bready note and a really toasty, grainy element sitting on top of that. There's a smooth bread, crusty, brown bready thing sitting underneath it. But yeah, everything that the backbone of this beer on the front third of your palate, it does develop a bit of a roastiness, which is interesting. But the fruity side of the beer, it's got a nice how do you say? It has got a nice little bit of just juicy, fruity character to it as well. So on the back of that front third of your palate, you get a wee bit, when you take the beer in, you do get a wee bit of a slightly raisiny sharpness out of it. So yeah, there's a wee bit of a raisiny sharpness there, but very quickly it gives way to a slightly more juicy plum. But that's at the very back of that front third of your palate. As you move further forward, it's quite figgy, but then it develops a little bit of a kind of black curranty juiciness on the front half of that front third of your palate, and you get a slightly more oily black berry kind of note as you progress further into the aftertaste too. But the fruitiness does linger there quite a little bit, and it just gives the beer a wee bit of a juicy fruity sharpness, which I can definitely appreciate. So yeah, I like how this beer goes about its business, definitely. Yeah, the fruity side of this beer kind of adds a good contrast to it, but I would say that overall this is quite a roasty, toasty Imperial Stout. It leans more towards the kind of Russian Imperial Stout side of things rather than anything else. And yeah, so if it is barrel aged, I think from the flavour, I've got a feeling this one's maybe more like oak chips that are in it rather than full on barrel aging. It just doesn't feel quite. It just doesn't have that sort of infused flavours that you would normally get from barrel aging are just not quite as prominent in this as you would expect. But I could be wrong. This one does taste as if it's more like oak chips that have been added into this one, to be honest. But regardless, it's a very nice beer, this one. And if I think about the other breweries in Asia that I've had very good stouts from, that's going to be the likes of Young Master in Hong Kong, Shiga Kogen beer in Japan, Mino in Osaka are also doing some really good stuff as well. This one certainly stands up there with the other Asian beer producers. This is very, very good. And I mean, if I think further afield than that to Europe, and to the States and to Australia and New Zealand, this beer certainly holds its own as well. I think it's nice. I mean, you compare it to some of the classic American stouts, you know, the 1050. I forget whether the perfect, is it the Perfect Storm from Ballast Point? You know, you compare it to these sort of things, it would stand up well. This is a proper old school Imperial Stout, and I certainly like it. I wouldn't hesitate to drink this again. As I say, for me, living in Scandinavia, the difference would be the mouthfeel. I think I've never found Imperial Stouts from anywhere else that are as thick as the ones we get here in Scandinavia. But yeah, in terms of flavour profile, I think it gives a very good account of itself. So well done to Heart of Darkness Brewery for this one. I really hope that I can get to Ho Chi Minh at some point and have a look at some of their other beers. That would be awesome. But yeah, I think that can round off the flavour, the tasting section of the video quite nicely. In terms of the mouthfeel, just to round off, I would say that this beer is kind of top end of mid-bodied. Yeah, top end of mid-bodied. Carbonation is quite smooth in this. It's a very slick beer, to be honest with you. It's a very, very slick beer, this one. As I say, the mouthfeel in a lot of big Asian beers like this tends to be a little bit lighter just because of the heat, I suspect, and they want an element of drinkability, so that's understandable. But in terms of the bitterness, it tells you on the bottle it's 80 IBUs. I think I probably would have guessed it was a little bit higher than that. I might have thought this was a 90 or 100 IBU beer, but anyway, but it really leans towards the roasty toasty side of things. It is more of like a Russian Imperial Stout rather than anything else. You get a wee bit of sweetness out of the beer, but mainly roasty and toasty and bready and things like this, and you've got just a lovely little bit of a juicy fruitiness to it. But in terms of introductions to Vietnamese beer, I think this has been a very, very good one. So I sincerely hope we can review a few more beers from this brewery and other Vietnamese breweries on the channel at some point. So yeah, fingers crossed I can find some way of getting a hold of some of those. But I guess maybe I will need to go to Vietnam, and that's not such a bad thing. That's not such a bad thing at all. But yeah, it would be cool if we do get to Vietnam. I would love to do one of the Meet the Brewery segments with the guys from the brewery. That would be awesome to do. To have John and Dwayne on there as well. That would be great. So who knows? Maybe you'll see a Vietnamese Meet the Brewer at some point, and we'll have John and Dwayne on for an interview. But yeah, I think we can round off the video there. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Thank you for all your support over the last 7 3/4 years. I thought this was a really nice beer to do for number 2800. Bit of a longer review, but you know, that's my reviews are like that. I just like to kind of try and break up the flavour and things. But I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below if you do happen to have tried it. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Heart of Darkness Brewery. And hopefully we can return to these guys at some point soon. Hopefully I can get a hold of some of their beers in Japan the next time I go over there. I'm looking at going over there later in the year. But if not, I'm hoping to get to Singapore, and we will have a look at their Singapore tap room at some stage too. But yeah, let's leave it there. Thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts, as I said, in the comment section below, and you know, give me some other Vietnamese brewery recommendations as well. Thank you for watching. This one was the Eloquent Phantom, an 11% Imperial Stout from Heart of Darkness Brewery in Ho Chi Minh City, formerly Saigon, in southern Vietnam. Slange, Skål, cheers.